Welcome to today's economics lesson. My name is Mr. Jameson Sivanai. In today's lesson, we're going to be looking at imperfect markets and in particular, oligopolies. So we're going to study the dynamics of imperfect markets with the aid of cost and revenue curves. Under oligopolies, we'll briefly look at the concepts, then followed by a study of the market structure itself called oligopolies. So by the end of this lesson, we will address the drawing of a clearly labeled King demand curve, explanation of the different elasticities in a King demand curve, broadly outlining the rationale of the King demand curve, showing by means of a curve why oligopolies are reluctant to compete on the basis of prices, and explaining briefly non-price competition and the types of collusion. The key concepts that we should study and be familiar with under this topic of oligopoly. We're going to come across some of these concepts in our discussion right through the topic. Familiarize yourself with these concepts, very important for your understanding of oligopoly as a market structure. The pre-knowledge, what should you know and be able to do? From your grade 10 and 11, know and apply the content of dynamics of markets and the price elasticity of demand. And from your grade 12, know and apply the content of dynamics of markets and be able to identify and calculate the profits and losses. Common content errors and misconceptions. Learners struggle to answer questions relating to the King demand curve. Learners cannot fully relate their responses to mutual dependence in the oligopoly market. Learners are unable to explain how actions of one oligopolistic firm affect the other. Exam writing competencies, reading skills. As you prepare yourself for the exam, you should have good reading skills. Critical thinking skills. Sometimes you're asking questions that do not come from the textbook, but they need your application. Active learning methods. Time management, very crucial to ensure that you finish the exam in time, as well as the fundamental numerical concepts and principles. They assist you in questions that require calculations. Thank you very much. Let us go for a short ad break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Moving on with our topic on oligopolies. We're going to briefly look at the concepts for now, then we'll move on to the analysis of the market structure itself called oligopoly. The content problem under key concepts is the inability to link a concept or a term with a description. The inability to briefly describe the term in a full sentence. Please take note of this. Inability to distinguish between various terms or to provide a term to match a description. So this also requires us to be able to draw the King demand curve, broadly outline the rationale of the King demand curve, show by means of a curve why oligopolies are reluctant to compete on the basis of price, explain briefly non-price competition, and discuss briefly types of collusion. So to deal with the key theory aspects, in other words, the key concepts, we are assessed in section A through multiple choice questions, matching item questions, as well as give one-term questions. So, what do you need to do? Create your vocabulary list, create visuals of the terminology, study those concepts and descriptions, and lastly, you need to test your concept knowledge. And how do you do that? You need to work through past NSC question papers by answering section A questions, because this is where the testing of concepts takes place. And for your self-evaluation, you can now mark your answers using the NSC marking guidelines. A typical example of a question, a multiple choice question that requires understanding of concepts, 1.1.1, a market structure where only a few sellers operates is known as. So you are given 4 options, but you need to choose the correct concept here. Our answer is B, that is oligopoly. 1.2, this is now the matching items. You read all the items in column A, then you read all the descriptions in column B. Non-price competition, collusion, price leadership, descriptions, a situation where one firm fixes a price and the others accept it as the market price. B, oligopolies use strategies such as aggressive advertising to gain market share. C, an arrangement between businesses with the aim of limiting competition between them by fixing prices. So let us now try to match these columns, the descriptions in column B with the item in column A. Now, for 1.2.1, that is the non-price competition, our answer is B. So here you are only writing the correct letter next to the question number, which says oligopolies use strategies such as aggressive advertising to gain market share. 1.2.2, the collusion, it's C. An arrangement between businesses to limit competition between them by fixing prices. 1.2.3, it's A, that is price leadership. It's a situation where one firm fixes a price and others accept it as the market price, right? The last one, under concepts, it's a question on giving one correct term. Of importance is to realize that abbreviations, acronyms, and examples will not be accepted. So you need to give a full concept, not an abbreviation. 1.3.1, a group of businesses in an oligopoly that comes together with the aim of fixing prices. The profit that is made in the long run in addition to normal profit. The oligopolist product is homogeneous. The oligopolist product is differentiated. So these are the descriptions. What they want us is to give the correct term explained by these descriptions. Let's see. 1.3.1, that's a cartel. 1.3.2, profit that is made in the long run in addition to normal profit, that is economic profit. 1.3.3, the oligopolist product is homogeneous, where in that market all oligopolies are producing a homogeneous product. It is called a pure oligopoly. And if they are producing a differentiated product, then the market is called a differentiated oligopoly. Now, moving on to the examination, the study of the market structure itself. The content problem here is learners struggle to draw the kinked demand curve, outline the rationale, and answer questions relating to the graph. Learners could not fully relate their responses to mutual dependence in the oligopoly market. Learners struggle to briefly explain or to discuss non-price competition and the types of collusion. Instead of explaining how actions of one firm affect the other, learners draw a kinked demand curve and explain the two segments. The key aspects: drawing and explanation of the King demand curve, explanation of non-price competition, explanation of why oligopolies do not compete on the basis of price by means of a graph, discussion on collusion, and distinguish between overt and tacit collusion. We are going to look at this as we proceed with our lesson. One example question says, explain non-price competition in the oligopolistic market. So what is very important is to underline the key concept that is asked in the question for 8 marks. What is non-price competition? Non-price competition in an oligopolistic market refers to strategies firms use to attract customers without changing prices. So without changing prices, that's what makes it non-price. So without reducing your price, how else can you attract? What else can you do to attract customers? So it includes product differentiation, such as offering unique features or improved quality, e.g., smartphone brands enhancing camera technology. It also includes advertising and branding, where firms invest heavily in marketing to create brand loyalty, e.g., Coca-Cola versus Pepsi. Other forms include customer service enhancements like extended warranties or better after-sales services, and promotional offers such as loyalty programs or free trials. So all these are non-price strategies, other measures that can be used by oligopolies to increase their market share or to attract more customers without necessarily reducing the price of the product. That is a non-price strategy or non-price competition. Next question, distinguish between overt and tacit collusion. We're going to start with overt collusion. Overt collusion is also known as a cartel. It's a form of collusion. What happens in this type of collusion? The firms agree to come together, then they decide on the prices and the production or the output level that they want to provide into the market. In most cases, they limit the quantity that they provide into the market, then they increase the price for that product. And how do they do that? They then determine the market share. So what they want to do is to increase their market share through advertising strategies and other strategies like product development. So when they come together, they operate together. The idea is to try and limit competition amongst themselves. They now operate as a collective monopoly. And it is very essential to realize that formation of such cartels or such behavior, collusive behavior, is illegal in South Africa. You'll get your 4 marks for this one. Then tacit collusion, it is also known as price leadership. This one is hidden and unspoken. And it is difficult to prove that firms have colluded. So how do they collude? This is based on price decisions by the price leader. So one firm, usually the largest business or the dominant firm in that market, will announce their decision either to increase the price or to reduce the price. Now, if other firms respond by increasing and reducing their prices as well, then we say a pattern of price leadership has existed. And in this case, eventually each and every firm will end up selling their product at the higher price. But it's not a formal, it is a hidden, and it is an unspoken way of colluding. Let us take another ad break. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back. We're proceeding with our discussion on oligopolies. In this section, we're going to look at the King demand curve. So our next question will be based on the King demand curve. Next, with the use of a King demand curve, explain why oligopolies are reluctant to compete on prices. That is why they cannot increase or decrease their prices. Why would they prefer to make use of non-price strategies? But as the question says, it requires us to use a King demand curve. So we're going to get our marks for drawing the curve and also for explaining. So how do you draw the curve? You draw your axis and label them, price and quantity. Draw the demand curve, the King demand curve. You can see that this demand curve has got two segments. The first segment, DA, then when it gets here, it forms a king and it changes the steepness. That's a King demand curve, right? Then label it. D is equals to AR, right? So this point A here becomes the kink. That's why it is called a King demand curve. So next, at the kink, this is very, very crucial. Technically, the firm will always produce a quantity at the kink and charge a price at the kink. So our price will be P1 and our quantity will be Q1. So the question is saying, why are they reluctant to compete on prices? In other words, why are they reluctant either to increase the price above P1 or to reduce the price below P1? We'll find out as we proceed with drawing our graph. So let's say the firm decides to increase the price from P1 to P2. Obviously, the quantity will decrease by a very big magnitude from Q1 to Q2. What if the firm decides now to reduce the price from P1 to P3? What happens? The quantity increases by just a small magnitude. You can see here from Q1 to Q3. Now, what does this mean? This means this upper part of the demand curve is elastic, meaning to say people are more sensitive to a price increase. You increase the price from P1 to P2, people decrease the quantity that they demand for your product by a very big magnitude. So you are going to lose customers and sales as well as your revenue. Then the lower part here is inelastic. What does that mean? Even if you reduce the price by a very big magnitude, trying to attract customers, because demand is inelastic, yes, people will increase the demand, but that increase is very small compared to the decrease in the price that the oligopolist would have made. So what does that mean? The oligopolist will also lose revenue. So because of that, the oligopolist has no incentive to increase the price. The oligopolist has no incentive to decrease the price. The only option that the oligopolist will have is to keep the price at the kink, which we call price stability. Now, let us look at the explanation here. It says if firm A decides to increase price to P2, the quantity demanded will decrease to Q2. The firm will face a relatively elastic demand curve above point A. Consumers will rather buy or demand cheaper goods from competitors. If firm A decides to decrease the price to P3, the quantity demanded will increase to Q3. The firm will face a relatively inelastic demand curve below the point A. Since competitors also decrease prices, it will result in a smaller percentage rise in demand. That is elastic. One other thing that you should take note of is what they call oligopolistic interdependence. That is, the actions of one firm can affect the decisions of other firms in this market. Let us look at what will happen if the firm increases its price from P to P2. Another thing that will discourage them from increasing prices is the fact that other firms will not likely increase their prices as well. So when the firm increases its price and other firms do not increase their prices, it is just as good as taking themselves out of the market. So there will be no incentive to increase the price. Now, with a price decrease, if the firm decides to decrease the price, other firms are likely going to decrease their prices as well, because they can't just let this firm get all the customers by selling at a lower price. So they will also try and decrease their prices, just like what the first firm did. But the problem is, eventually, all of them will be selling at a lower price, meaning to say they will be getting less revenue. So we can conclude and say, increasing the price is not a good option. Decreasing the price is once again not a good option. Why? In both cases, the firms lose revenue. The only option that they are left with is to keep their price unchanged at the king. Briefly outline the rationale of the king demand curve. In this case, there is no graph. They are testing now your understanding of what the king demand curve is all about in terms of output and price decisions. So they are saying firms believe that if they raise their prices, competitors will not follow. That's the first thing, causing them to lose customers. Therefore, the demand for their product becomes highly elastic above the current price. Why elastic? Because if you increase your price and other firms do not increase, customers will stop buying your product and they go and buy the products of the competitors whose prices remained unchanged. They become sensitive to a price change. That's elastic. Conversely, if they lower prices, competitors are likely to match the reduction to avoid losing market share. What they mean here is that if one firm lowers its price, other firms will also lower their prices so that they don't lose customers or they don't lose the market share. And that makes the demand curve relatively inelastic below the current price. As a result, firms have little incentive to change prices, leading to price stability. Our first question says, study the extract below and answer the questions that follow. So you actually have to read the extract. The heading, Oligopoly, collusion in the banking sector. 3 South African banks have been implicated in widespread collusion relating to price fixing of the rand. The investigation looked at cases of price fixing and market allocation in the trading of foreign exchange involving the rand. It has been alleged that the foreign exchange traders have been buying and selling US dollars in exchange for the rand at fixed prices. The competition policy has made provision for the establishment of the Competition Commission, Competition Tribunal, and Competition Appeal Court to deal with issues of collusion in different sectors of the economy. Now our question, identify the institution that is responsible for investigating anti-competitive behavior. So we get this institution from the extract, that is our Competition Commission. Next question, name the type of collusion explained in the extract above. This is overt or formal or explicit collusion that took place in the banking sector. Briefly describe the term oligopoly. So this tests for your understanding of the concept, oligopoly. It's a market structure dominated by few large firms. So few in terms of number, large in terms of the size. How does the South African government prevent collusion in an oligopoly market? So what measures can be taken by the government to prevent such collusive behavior? The South African government prevents collusion in oligopolies primarily through the Competition Act, enforced by the Competition Commission, which investigates anti-competitive behavior, imposes fines, and conducts raids on suspected firms. What is the impact of the price fixing on the market? So we want the impact of price fixing. Consumers may end up paying higher prices for goods and services. Businesses may be forced to pay penalties if they are found guilty of price fixing. So it is affecting both consumers and businesses as well. Demand for the product may decrease as customers fail to afford the higher prices. Businesses may temporarily enjoy high profits, which may increase the supply of the product. So businesses here are increasing supply or are also enjoying high profits because of selling their products at higher prices due to price fixing. Next question. Study the information below and answer the questions that follow. So we are given this extract here, and below it, it says, oligopolistic participants do not operate in isolation. Their decisions ripple through the market, affecting competitors and consumers. Number one, identify the nature of the service offered by the firms above. So this is the aviation industry, different airlines. What type of service do they provide? They provide homogeneous or differentiated services. So some of the services might be the same, but at some point, these airlines, they try to make their services look different in a way to try and attract customers. Name one example of barriers to entry into the market depicted above. High starting capital, economies of scale, brand loyalty, licenses, and regulations. Briefly describe the term imperfect market. For 2 marks, it occurs when any of the conditions of the perfect competition do not exist. So any firm or any market structure that does not exhibit the features of a perfect market, then that is imperfect market. Explain interdependence as a characteristic of an oligopolistic market. Interdependence exists when firms in an oligopoly consider their rivals' reactions while adjusting prices and output. Each firm is aware of how rival firms will react to any action it takes. So in this case, we are talking about before a firm makes a decision, it will have to consider the actions that are going to be taken by the competitors. Just a good example is to say, before a firm decides to increase the price of its products, it has to consider what is the likely next move that is going to be taken by the other competitors. Are they going to increase their price as well, or are they going to keep their prices unchanged? And in that case, it is going to have an impact on the firm's profits and revenue. So they depend on each other. In short, one firm's decisions can be affected by actions that are taken by other firms. That is the interdependence. How do competitors in an oligopoly market benefit from collusion? And we are talking about benefits to who? To the competitors themselves. Collusion in an oligopoly allows firms to set higher prices and avoid competition, increasing their profits and stabilizing the market. It reduces competitive pressure and it creates barriers for new entrants while enabling firms to cut costs through coordination. In this case, it creates barriers in the sense that when oligopolists collude, they operate as a collective monopoly. So they now have more power in the market to dominate the market and close doors for any potential entrant that wants to come into the market. Next question. With the aid of a correctly labeled graph, briefly explain why it is advisable for oligopolies to sell at a market price. So because the question is about oligopolies, and the question is just saying a correctly labeled graph, they don't tell us that it should be a king demand curve. But because it's an oligopoly, we know that the demand curve of an oligopoly is a king demand curve. So what you have to do, draw your axes and label them, price, quantity and price. Then because it's a demand curve for an oligopolist, it should be a demand curve that has got two segments. The upper segment that is relatively elastic and the lower segment that is relatively inelastic. Then for an oligopolist, the king is always our equilibrium. So the firm should set a price at the king, and also the quantity that they should sell should be at the king as well. Now, our explanation is above the king, the demand is relatively elastic, and below the king, the demand is relatively inelastic. So, it is not advisable for them to increase the price or decrease the price, and it is advisable for them to sell at the market price because, one, if they increase the price from 70 going up, demand is elastic. So consumers are price sensitive. They are likely going to reduce or stop buying the product. And secondly, increasing the price because of oligopolistic interdependence, the most likelihood is that other firms will not respond by increasing their prices as well. So in so doing, the firm will be taking itself out of the market. So there's no incentive to increase the price, but to sell at the market price. Let us look at a price decrease. Reducing the price, demand is inelastic. In other words, you cannot attract customers to buy more by reducing the price. You reduce the price, they continue to buy more or less the same quantity. And what it only does to the oligopolist is they are going to get less revenue, and that is going to reduce their profits. So once again, they cannot reduce the price for fear of losing the revenue. And secondly, they cannot reduce the price because other firms are likely going to reduce their revenues as well, their prices as well. So eventually, all the firms, in the market will end up selling at a lower price and getting low revenue. So the only option that they are left with is to maintain the price at the king, and that is the market price. Let us look at the explanation. So you are going to get your marks, 1 mark for labeling of the axis, another 2 marks, correct drawing and labeling of the curves. That is 1 mark for the elastic part and 1 mark for the inelastic part. And the other mark, you get it for the king. Even if you don't write the word king, but you can indicate either by means of a dot or by means of a letter, like in this case, they put the letter E. You are showing us that there is something happening here that forms a turning point for this graph. You can still get your mark. That gives you 4 marks. Then the other 4 marks will be for the explanation. It says here, suppose an oligopolist is selling at a market price of 70 and 40 units of output are sold. The total revenue will be 70 times 40. That is price times quantity. So at the kink, this is the revenue at the kink. Now, when a firm wants to increase profits by increasing the price to 90, quantity demanded will fall to 10. So if the firm decides to increase the price to 90 here, the quantity will decrease to 10. And what will be the total revenue? The total revenue will decrease to 90 times 10 because it will be the price times the new quantity. So by increasing the price, the firm's revenue will only decrease to 900 from 2,800. Let's see what happens if they decide to reduce the price. If a firm wants to increase profits by reducing the price to 60 Rand a year, the quantity demanded will increase to 42, fine. Quantity will increase to 42 a year at a price of 60. So we can calculate the total revenue there. The total revenue will actually be 60 times 42. That's how they'll get it. The 60 times 42, which gives us 2,520. If you compare this with the revenue at the kink, you discover that decreasing the price will also cause the revenue to what? To decrease. So what should the oligopolist do? When oligopolists sell at the market price, they yield more income. So they get maximum income only if they sell at 70 Rand, which is the market price at the kink. All right, let us take an ad break. We'll be back quickly. Welcome back from the break. We're proceeding with our practice questions. The first question that we have says, study the extract below and answer the questions that follow. We are given an extract. We should read it. The heading says, flying around SA has just got more expensive. ComAir has been forced to ground flights several times due to safety and security risks. This has resulted in limited competition in the aviation space. With a considerable amount of competition almost instantly cut from South Africa's airspace, demand outstripped supply, driving up prices on other airlines and triggering a warning from the Competition Commission around price fixing. Our first question, identify any one term in the extract that relates to price formation. So this is a given. We get it from the extract. Our answer is demand and supply. Terms that have to do with formation of prices, demand or supply. Number 2, name the market structure where price fixing is common. Price fixing is common in oligopoly markets. Number 3, briefly describe the term cartel. What is a cartel? It is an organization of firms coming together, operating like a monopoly, firms coming together to limit quantity and fix prices. You can also say to limit competition amongst themselves. Explain the role of the Competition Commission in the economy. Competition Commission investigates, controls, evaluates restrictive business practices, abuse of dominant positions and measures in different markets. It also makes recommendations to the Competition Tribunal on penalties to be imposed on businesses that are found guilty. So what the Competition Commission does in this instance, they only make recommendations. Remember, we've got 3 institutions. That is the Competition Commission, the Competition Tribunal, and the Competition Appeal Court. So the Competition Commission, after making their investigations, they make recommendations which they give to the Competition what? Tribunal. Okay. How can low prices negatively affect the producers of goods and services? So our question is talking about the effect of low prices on producers. How are producers affected by low prices? The producers may not be able to make sufficient revenue to cover production costs because they are selling at a low price. Number 2, lower profits, yes, may result in the businesses unable to pay their employees, leading to retrenchments. And lastly, investors may withdraw their investment, resulting in producers not having enough funds to continue doing business. Another question? Study the cartoon below and answer the questions that follow. Let's start. What do we have here? It says save our airline under businesses rescue. Now what? So let's see the question that we are asked based on this cartoon. Identify the state enterprise depicted in the cartoon above. That is SAA, South African Airways. Name the market structure under which it operates. It operates in an oligopoly or in an imperfect market. Remember, an oligopoly is an example of an imperfect market. Briefly describe the term overt or explicit collusion. Refers to a situation in which firms in an industry openly and directly, so openly and directly coordinate their actions to achieve common goals, typically aimed at maximizing profit. So in your description, you need to highlight that this is done openly, directly, officially, formally, and also indicate the aim, mainly to maximize their profits by limiting competition amongst themselves and also increasing their prices. Why is it difficult for new firms to enter the airline industry? So indirectly, the question is asking about the what? The barriers to entry into this market. What makes it difficult for new entrants to enter into this market? What are the barriers associated with that? 1, starting an airline requires a substantial upfront cost. So the startup capital itself is a barrier. For purchasing or leasing an aircraft, meeting safety and regulatory requirements, as well as setting up infrastructure. So the fact that a lot of money is needed upfront automatically becomes a barrier to entering into this market. High capital requirements act as a significant barrier to new entrants. What impact would the collapse of the airline have on the South African economy? So if this industry collapses, how does it affect the South African economy? So the collapse of the South African Airways could result in widespread job losses, contributing to higher unemployment. So the people that would be working in that industry will lose their jobs if it collapses. Number 2, the collapse of the airline would disrupt these these interconnected supply chains affecting various businesses and potentially leading to job losses in related industries. So it's not only going to affect jobs in the airline industry, but jobs in related industries will also be affected. And lastly, the collapse of the airline could lead to reduced accessibility, potentially impacting the tourism industry and related sectors like the hospitality and travel services. So traveling will also be negatively impacted, and it will also have a negative bearing for that matter, on the tourism industry. All right. Let us take a short ad break. We'll be back again. Welcome back. We are now wrapping up our lesson. In our lesson, we were discussing imperfect markets, and in particular, we're looking at oligopolies, studying the dynamics of oligopoly as an imperfect market with the aid of cost and revenue curves. So we did the concepts. We also looked at the analysis of the market structure itself. We also looked at the key concepts. We emphasizing that we should familiarize ourselves with these concepts. They help us in our section A, section B, and even in our essays. Common content errors and misconceptions. Learners struggle to answer questions relating to the King demand graph. Learners cannot fully relate their responses to mutual dependence in the oligopoly market. Learners are unable to explain how actions of one oligopolistic firm affect the other. And the exam writing competencies, very important skills as you prepare yourself for the exam. Reading skills, critical thinking skills, active learning methods, time management, very crucial, as well as the fundamental numerical concepts and principles. Very important once again for the calculations, especially on this topic. Now, for further practice, you can go through these past exam question papers as depicted here. That is going to give you more practice as you prepare for your examination. Thank you very much. This takes us to the end of this lesson. Goodbye.